Capital of Evil. Part 1. The Extraction of Energy. Capital is not what you think it is. You have been taught in economics class that capital means money or wealth. That is not wrong, but it is incomplete. It is the surface of a much deeper truth. Capital is not a thing. Capital's a mechanism, a machine designed for one purpose: to extract energy from you. Not just the physical energy of your labor, not just the hours you spend at work. Something more fundamental. In a universe where consciousness is the foundation of reality, energy means attention. Energy means focus. Energy means the direction of your awareness. And capital is the system that harvests that awareness and turns it into something the powerful can use. It is not enough for you to work. You must also concentrate. You must care. You must be anxious about your future, afraid of falling behind, desperate to succeed. That anxiety, that fear, that desperate focus, that is the true product of capitalism. The money is just the bait. Let us take the most basic example, the landlord and the peasant. For most of human history, this was the fundamental relationship of economic life. The landlord owned the land. The peasant worked it. The landlord extracted rent, usually in the form of grain or labor. But here is what the textbooks do not tell you. Grain is easy to grow. It can be stored. It has limits. A peasant only needs so much grain to feed his family. Once his family is fed, once he has set aside a little for the winter, he stops working. He rests. He enjoys his life. He plays with his children. He talks with his neighbors. He is human. The landlord cannot have this. If the peasant stops working, the landlord stops getting richer. So the landlord faces a problem. How do you make a peasant work beyond his needs? How do you extract not just surplus grain, but surplus attention, surplus focus, surplus life? Over centuries, the landlord class, the elite, the capitalists, the powerful, developed three great mechanisms to solve this problem. The first mechanism is the illusion of freedom. Slavery seems like the most direct method of extraction. You own the worker. You control every moment of their life. They cannot leave. They cannot refuse. But slavery has a fatal flaw. It does not motivate. A slave works just hard enough to avoid punishment. A slave does not innovate. A slave does not care. The moment you turn your back, the slave slows down, rests, sabotages. You cannot extract maximum energy from a slave because a slave has no stake in the system. So, the elite learned to give the illusion of freedom. Let the peasants believe they have control over their own lives. Let them think they can choose their jobs, their homes, their futures. Give them equity. A small share of the company. A small piece of the dream. Now they work harder. Now they care. Now they stay up at night worrying about their investments, their mortgages, their retirements. They are not slaves. They are volunteers. And volunteers always work harder than prisoners. The second mechanism is the abstraction of capital. Grain was the first form of capital, but grain has limits. You can only eat so much. You can only store so much. Once your granary is full, you stop. So the elite moved from grain to gold. Gold is rarer. Gold is harder to find. Gold has no practical use. You cannot eat it. You cannot build with it. But it is beautiful, and it is scarce. A few people will spend their entire lives chasing gold. Most will not. Gold is not abstract enough. So the elite moved from gold to money. And here is the great innovation of the past 500 years. They convinced the world that money is God. Money is both nothing and everything, a piece of paper, a number on a screen. It has no intrinsic value. It cannot feed you, clothe you, or shelter you. And yet, people will spend their entire lives dedicated to achieving more of it. They will sacrifice their health, their relationships, their happiness, their sanity. All for numbers in a bank account. This is the magic of abstraction. Because money is infinitely abstract, you can chase it forever. There is no satiation point. No matter how much you have, you can always have more. And so you never stop working, you never stop focusing, you never stop giving your energy to the system. The third mechanism is anxiety. If you want people to focus their energy, you must make them afraid. Debt is the most powerful tool for creating anxiety. I lend you $1 million today. You enjoy it. You buy a house, a car, a lifestyle. But now, you owe me. With interest. And because of the interest, you can never really pay it back. You will spend the rest of your life working for me, not for yourself. Every month, a portion of your energy flows to me. And you feel it. You feel the weight. You feel the anxiety. That anxiety keeps you focused, keeps you working, keeps you from resting. Inequality is another tool of anxiety. The poor are always there, always visible, always suffering. They are the warning. Your parents point to them and say, "Work hard in school, or you will end up like that." The poor are not a failure of the system. The poor are a feature of the system. They are the stick that drives the middle class to run faster. And then there is wealth destruction, war, depression, economic collapse. When the peasants work too hard and store up too much grain, they become complacent. They stop working. So the landlord burns the granary. War is not just a mechanism for expanding territory or acquiring resources. War is a mechanism for destroying wealth. When your savings vanish overnight, when your house is bombed, when your currency becomes worthless, you have no choice but to work harder than ever before. The cycle of boom and bust, which your economics textbook calls a natural feature of capitalism, is not natural. It is artificial. It is engineered. It is the system resetting itself so that the peasants never rest. This is the secret that economics does not teach you. The point of capitalism is not to accumulate capital. The point of capitalism is to focus the energies of the population, to extract attention, to harvest focus. Wealth is actually a problem for the system because wealthy people become lazy. They stop working. They start enjoying their lives. And an enjoying person is not a productive person. So the system must constantly destroy wealth, create anxiety, and move the goalposts. It must keep you running on a treadmill that never stops. Today, we are the wealthiest society in human history. We have more food, more medicine, more technology, more comfort than any generation before us. And yet, we are also the most miserable, the most anxious, the most in debt, the most depressed. This is not a contradiction. This is the system working exactly as designed. The wealth is the bait. The misery is the hook. Your anxiety is the energy they harvest. The elite have learned that if you push people too hard, they will eventually revolt. The pressure becomes too great, the suffering too obvious, and the peasants rise up. So the elite developed a solution. They move. Transnational capital has no loyalty to nation, to people, or to place. The wealthy will go wherever they need to go to keep their capital safe and growing. They will move to Dubai, to Hong Kong, to Singapore. They will pay less taxes, avoid social conflict, find better investment opportunities. They will abandon the peasants to destroy each other, wait until the violence exhausts itself, and then return to rebuild on their terms. This is the system that rules the world today. It is called transnational capital, and it functions because of secret societies. Because when you move from place to place, you face a problem. You do not know anyone. You cannot trust the people in your new location. How do you build trust quickly? How do you coordinate across continents? The answer, developed over centuries, is the secret society, a network of loyalty that transcends borders, nations, and cultures, a hidden hand that moves money and power across the globe without leaving a trace. What you will learn in this audiobook is that secret societies and transnational capital are essentially the same thing. They are the force that rules the world, and to understand them, you must understand something darker still: the religion of the elite. Part 2: The faith of the elite. The landlord class and the peasant class are fundamentally different. Their motivations, their beliefs, their worldviews, they cannot be the same. The peasants want a simple life. They want to make some money, have a family, have some fun, believe in God. For the peasants, there is organized religion: Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Confucianism. These religions teach you to be good, to be kind, to help your neighbor, to accept your place in the world. But the landlord class has a different responsibility. They have an obligation to control the peasant class and extract as much energy as possible. Their religious practices must be different. Where the peasant prays to God, the landlord must pray to Satan. This is true for all societies throughout human history. In the past, the elite were blatant about it. They built temples to dark gods. They performed human sacrifices. They did not hide their worship of power. Today, they are more hypocritical, more secretive. But the underlying religion remains the same. To understand why the elite must pray to Satan, you must understand a basic fact of human psychology. It is hard to do terrible things. You might think that if someone offered you $10 million to kill a random stranger late at night, you could do it. No one would know. You would be rich. But when it actually comes time to pull the trigger, most people cannot. There are psychological constraints on behavior. We are wired for empathy. We are wired for connection. We are wired not to harm others. Suicide is an even clearer example. If someone offered you $100 million and guaranteed you a place in heaven, would you kill yourself? Probably not. The instinct for self-preservation is too strong. Killing yourself is, in many ways, no different from killing someone else. We cannot do it. But the elite have found hacks around this limitation. They have discovered ways to make people do terrible things without feeling guilty about it. Two social science experiments from 20th century America reveal how. The first is the Milgram experiment. At Yale University, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram set up a simple experiment. He had an actor, a Confederate, hooked up to what looked like an electric chair. There was a buzzer that supposedly increased the voltage. Milgram invited volunteers, ordinary students, to act as assistants. Their job was to press the button. Milgram wanted to know, would a volunteer agree to shock another human being, even after seeing that person in pain? And how much pain would the volunteer be willing to inflict? The results were disturbing. Under the influence of authority, a man in a lab coat telling them it was okay, people were willing to inflict tremendous pain on strangers. They were able to remove responsibility from themselves. "I didn't do it," they told themselves. I was ordered to do it. The presence of authority allowed them to bypass their own conscience. This is the first function of secret societies. They allow the elite to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. By praying to a higher power, by believing that they are possessed by demons or controlled by extraterrestrials or following the commands of Satan, they can tell themselves that they are not responsible. They did not start the war. They did not destroy the economy. Satan told them to do it. They had a meeting with Satan. They performed the rituals. They summoned the dark forces. And Satan said, "For the good of the world, you must be evil. You must start this war so that paradise can be created on earth." It was not us. It was Satan. This is why secret societies are obsessed with dark gods. Saturn, Cronus, the god of time and order and structure. Cronus did unconscionable things to maintain control over the world, including eating his own children so that they could not rebel against him. The elite pray to Saturn to channel that divine energy, to maintain order and control for the good of humanity. Or so they tell themselves. The second experiment is the Solomon Asch experiment. 10 people sit in a room. They are shown a simple shape and asked to identify whether it is a straight line or a circle. 9 of them are Confederates, part of the conspiracy. They all give the wrong answer on purpose. The 10th person, the real volunteer, goes last. He hears 9 people confidently say the line is a circle, and when it is his turn, most of the time, he agrees with them. He says it is a circle. But here is the terrifying part. Afterward, when he is told that it was actually a line, he is often convinced that he saw a circle. The power of group conformity is so strong that it changes his memory. This is the second function of secret societies. They create a closed loop of conformity. When everyone around you believes the same thing, you believe it too. When everyone around you has done terrible things, you feel no guilt about doing them yourself. The group normalizes the abnormal. The group makes evil feel virtuous. Together, authority and conformity give the elite the power to do what ordinary people cannot. They can take a gun, kill a stranger late at night, and collect their $10 million. Not because they are evil by nature, but because they have built a psychological architecture that allows them to bypass their own conscience. Sometimes, secret societies are forced to do even worse things because they are in competition with each other. The question is always, who is more evil? Who is more committed? Who has gone further beyond the bounds of normal morality? This competition drives an escalation of depravity, and the structure that enables this escalation is hierarchy. At the top of the secret society are the masters. At the bottom are the initiates, people who want to join but are kept ignorant of the true purpose. The question is, how do you maintain this hierarchy? How do you ensure that the initiates never betray you, never rise against you, never reveal your secrets? The answer is a simple and ancient principle of human psychology. Throughout human history, it was common for groups of young men, discarded by their families because there was not enough food, to form wolf packs. They would roam the countryside, and what they wanted most was a wife. Not food, not land, a wife. So they would go as a gang to a village, kill the family, and kidnap the woman. Now, consider the psychology of that woman. Her entire life has been destroyed. Her husband is dead. Her children are dead. She has been taken by strangers who murdered everyone she loved. What does she feel? You might think she wants vengeance. You might think she becomes depressed. But what actually happens consistently across human history is that she falls in love with one of her captors. This is called Stockholm Syndrome. When a person's reality collapses completely, when everything they knew is gone, they cling to anyone who offers stability, even if that person is the one who destroyed their life. Now consider the psychology of the 5 men who committed the murder. Do they feel guilty? Do they fight over the woman? No. They become brothers forever. The terrible act they committed together has unified them. They are bound by blood and by shared transgression. This is the structure of secret societies. The masters at the top commit rituals of torture and abuse on the initiates. These rituals break the initiates down. They traumatize them. They dissociate them from their own memories and emotions. And then, when the initiates are most vulnerable, the masters show them kindness. They offer them belonging. They give them a new family, and the initiates become slaves, completely loyal, completely dependent, willing to do anything for the masters who saved them from the abyss they themselves created. The ones who are most willing to participate in these rituals, the ones who embrace the trauma, who prove they can endure anything, become the middle managers. They are trusted because they have been broken and rebuilt. They have no secrets from the masters. They cannot betray, because betrayal would mean confronting what they have done and what has been done to them. This is why secret societies have so many degrees. The outer degrees know almost nothing. The inner degrees know more. And at the very top, no one knows what the masters are really doing, except that they are praying to Satan, summoning dark forces, and preparing for the end of the world. Let us take a concrete example. Sparta. Sparta was a militaristic society intent on maintaining control over its slaves, the Helots. The Helots outnumbered the Spartans 10-1. To maintain control, the Spartans needed to be incredibly cohesive. They needed soldiers who would fight and die for each other without hesitation. Their education system was designed to produce exactly that. At age 5 or 6, a Spartan child was taken from his parents. This created immediate fear and anxiety. Then the child was sent to school where he was beaten by older children. This created trauma. Generation after generation, the same pattern. Intergenerational trauma. The child was now unsafe, insecure, his mind broken. Then, when he was most vulnerable, around age 11 or 12, he was paired with an older man, a warrior in his late 20s or early 30s. These two became lovers. The older man would first commit sexual abuse, but because the child was traumatized, because he had no bearings, no reality, no belief that anyone in the world loved him, he fell in love with his abuser. He would do anything the man ordered. This older man became his general. The boy became his soldier, and that is why the Spartans were so fearless. The soldiers were completely loyal to their generals because they were once lovers. The soldier felt that this general, who he must obey, had saved his life when he needed it most. When his parents abandoned him, when he was beaten every day, when he felt complete insecurity. The general came and gave him a home, so the soldier would die for him. The same principles are used today in inner-city gangs and drug cartels. Young boys, 13 or 14 years old, with no father, are put into a gang. They are abused. Then the gang leader treats them well, and these boys become loyal to the gang leader for life. The same is true of child armies in Africa. If you abuse a child and then be nice to that child is obedient to you forever. This is how secret societies behave. Another famous example, the assassins. The word comes from hashish, a hallucinogenic drug. The masters would give young initiates hashish, making their minds blurry, making them feel as though they were in a dream. Then they would be taken to a beautiful room where young women would pleasure them. Then they would wake up in their own homes, thinking it was a dream. Their master would tell them, "This is what paradise is like. If you do what I tell you, I guarantee you will go to heaven, where 10,000 virgins will pleasure you for eternity." These initiates became the most dedicated killers in history. It is very hard to convince someone to kill another person, but the assassins were willing to do anything to enter paradise. Sex plus trauma plus psychedelics. These three things, combined in the right way, create perfect slaves. The slaves are forever loyal to their masters. They are completely emotionally dependent. They will do whatever it takes to please the person who broke them and rebuilt them. And they can be trained from an early age to infiltrate other secret societies, to become spies, to become killers. This is how the elite fight each other. They recruit armies of traumatized children. They brutalize them. They turn them into weapons. And then they unleash them on their enemies. Now we must ask, where did this system come from? How did it develop into the transnational capitalism that rules the world today? The answer takes us through 4 stages of history: Venice, the Dutch Republic, England, and America. Part 3: The 4 stages of transnational capital. These 4 places are special because they are all merchant oligarchies, societies controlled by private interests, not by kings or democracies. Your school textbooks call America and England democracies. That is nonsense. They've always been oligarchies, controlled by private interests, and they still are today. The way these merchant oligarchies maintain control over their populations and the world is through 3 mechanisms. The first is banking. The oligarchs pool their resources to extract energy from the world. Banking allows them to extract energy across time and space, to borrow money from the future and spend it today. This is the abstraction of capital made concrete. The second is naval power. Control the seas, control trade, control the world. The British Empire understood this better than anyone. The third is diplomacy. The oligarchies do not want to fight wars because their populations are small. They want to trick other people into fighting wars for them. They use spies, intelligence, and trade negotiations to pit their enemies against each other. In all 4 stages, the merchant oligarchy is controlled by a secret society, not by a king, not by an elected government, by a hidden network of loyalty that allows the merchants to work together across continents and generations. Venice was the first great merchant oligarchy. After the Roman Empire collapsed, noble families were impoverished. They scattered. The city that became dominant was Venice, not because it had resources, but because it had none. It was surrounded by marshes, hard to invade, and not worth invading. Its only advantage was its location on the coast, which allowed it to engage in piracy, trade, and diplomacy. Venice had to trade because it had nothing else. It set up trade networks throughout the Middle Ages, importing spices from East Asia to Europe. It became extremely wealthy. Its merchants pooled their resources in banks, taking risks that no individual could afford. They became parasites on larger empires, bribing imperial bureaucrats, setting up alliances with Muslims and Mongols alike. Marco Polo was Venetian. His travels were not just exploration, they were intelligence gathering for the merchant network. But Venice was on the continent of Europe and therefore easy to invade. Its wealth made it a target. The Dutch Republic would learn from Venice's vulnerability and improve upon it. The Dutch Republic was ruled by merchants who had adopted Calvinism, the Protestant faith that taught that wealth was a sign of God's favor. If you worked hard and made a lot of money, you knew you were going to heaven. And if you made even more money, you knew you were even more favored. So everyone in the Dutch Republic worked extremely hard. It was an incredibly energetic society. The Dutch fed off the Spanish Empire. The Spanish had gone to South America and captured vast amounts of gold, which made their people lazy. The Dutch took advantage of this in 3 ways. First, piracy. They stole Spanish gold. Second, industry. They sold manufactured goods to the lazy Spanish. Third, luxury goods. They controlled the spice trade. The wealth of the Spanish Empire transferred to the energy and industry of the Dutch Republic. The Dutch East India Company became the world's wealthiest corporation, a nation unto itself, with its own army, its own currency, its own government. It could enact its own laws in the regions it controlled. This was transnational capital in its early form. But the Dutch Republic was still on the continent, still vulnerable to invasion. Its wealth needed a safer home. In 1688, the Dutch aristocrat William of Orange was invited to become King of England. This was the Glorious Revolution. The Dutch transferred their capital to England, and in 1694, the Bank of England was established. The Bank of England was a private bank guaranteed by Parliament. This meant that if you invested in the bank and lost money, the government would ensure you got it back. It was a revolutionary concept. The bank could print money. It could lend unlimited amounts to the government to fight wars. And because it was guaranteed by Parliament, the loans would always be repaid, unless England was destroyed as a nation. This allowed England to become an empire. The Bank of England could borrow money from the future and across space. It could finance 7 wars against Napoleon, losing 6 of them, and still keep fighting because the money never ran out. England was not fighting the wars, it was just financing them. And it could not stop fighting because if it stopped, it would go bankrupt. The system was self-perpetuating. The British Empire used the Bank of England to control global trade through its navy. Its grand strategy was simple. As long as it controlled the seaways, it controlled the world. The only threat was the emergence of a great power within the Eurasian continent, the heartland. If Germany, Russia, or China could unify Eurasia through railways, creating a single trading bloc that did not need seaways, the British Empire would collapse. So Britain's strategy was to create as much chaos and conflict in Europe as possible. Always keep your enemies fighting each other. Never let them unite. This strategy was implemented through spies, through revolutionary movements, through the manipulation of finance. The British Empire needed agents to help them implement this strategy. The Sabbatean Frankists, the followers of Sabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank, were the perfect allies. Part 4. The Sabbatean Frankists. To understand the Sabbatean Frankists, we must go back to Jewish history. For most of human history, the Middle East was the wealthiest part of the world. The Levant, especially Jerusalem, was the center because it connected all the major civilizations: Egypt, Anatolia, Mesopotamia, Persia, the Mediterranean. All roads led to Jerusalem. Whoever controlled Jerusalem controlled the major trade access point, the most profitable part of any empire. The great empires struggled to control Jerusalem because whoever controlled it could always switch sides. If Mesopotamia controlled Jerusalem, Egypt could bribe Jerusalem to switch. The Babylonians tried taking captives hostage. That did not work. So they destroyed Jerusalem entirely, scattering the Jewish identity. Then the Persians conquered Babylon and adopted a new technique: divide and rule. They created a Jewish identity and implanted it in Jerusalem. This would create conflict between the locals and the Jews. The Jews would be forever loyal to Persia because they were a foreign entity within the Levant. Only by swearing loyalty to Persia could they maintain control. In return, the Persians financed the building of the Second Temple. At this point in history, a Jewish identity emerged with 3 pillars that continue today. First, monotheism. Yahweh is the only God, and the Jews are his chosen people. Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham, promising that his people would control the Promised Land, from the Nile in Egypt to the Euphrates in Mesopotamia. Second, the law of Moses. The Torah is the written law. The Talmud is the oral law. These laws govern every aspect of life, resting on the Sabbath, not marrying outside the religion, circumcision, dietary restrictions. Third, the Bible as collective memory. The Jews believe that what happened in the Bible is literal history. By believing the Bible is literally true, you become a Jew. Over time, the Jews expanded across the world. They worked as mercenaries in Greek armies. They moved for economic opportunities as officials, artisans, traders, and merchants. The Jewish, Greek, and Persian cultures merged through syncretism, giving birth to Western civilization. But conflict was inevitable. The Greeks were chauvinistic, believing their culture was superior. Many Jews converted to the Hellenistic lifestyle, but others resisted. The Maccabean Revolt, celebrated today as Hanukkah, was a rebellion of fanatical Jews against the Greeks who wanted to turn the Second Temple into a site for worshipping Greek gods. Then the Romans came. The Romans were even more chauvinistic than the Greeks, more discriminatory toward the Jews. 3 major wars broke out between the Romans and the Jews. In the year 70, the Romans burned down the Second Temple to destroy Jewish morale. The destruction of the Second Temple caused a seismic shift in Jewish religion. The temple had been the house of God, where Yahweh lived. Without it, many Jews converted to Christianity, which Paul had created as a way for Jews to remain Jewish while also being Roman. Those who stayed became more fanatical, developing a messianic, eschatological belief that the end of the world was coming, that God would destroy the Romans, and that they must show their loyalty to God. Some went into the Arabian desert, where they incubated a new religion, Islam, and prophesied the coming of a Messiah who turned out to be Muhammad. The Jews were kicked out of Jerusalem. Their religion shifted from temple worship to the worship of law. The rabbis, the Pharisees who taught the oral law, became the new elite. In Europe, the Jews made a deal with the nobility. It was not written down, but it was understood. The Jews would become slaves to the nobility. In Christian Europe, it was forbidden to charge interest on loans, but that was the most profitable business, so the nobility got the Jews to do it for them. The Jews also managed property, engaged in trade and industry, made loans to finance wars, practiced medicine, and served as financiers. And they were kept around as a scapegoat. The Catholic Church used the Jews to scare Christians. If you do not believe in Jesus, you will end up like the Jews. This arrangement worked when the economy was good. But when the economy was bad, when people were angry, the Jews were blamed. They were the loan sharks. They killed Jesus. They caused spiritual pollution. The contract was clear. You are allowed to stay and make money, but when we need a scapegoat, you get blamed and you leave, or you are massacred. One place in Europe was friendly to the Jews: Spain, controlled by Muslims. The Muslims believed that Jews, Christians, and Muslims were all one family, descendants of Abraham. Jews rose high within the Andalusian system. But over time, the Christians reconquered Spain and forced Jews to convert or leave. In 1492, the Spanish expelled the Jews. It was a traumatic event. Many Jews settled in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a new nation with tolerant policies. They thrived again. But this area was easily invaded. Wars broke out. Jews were killed. When they thought they had finally found a home, persecution followed. This history created a crisis of faith among the Jewish people. If Yahweh is the one true God, why can Jews convert to Christianity and Islam without consequence? Why are the Jews who remain loyal to Yahweh punished? If Yahweh promised a homeland, why do the Jews not have it? Whenever there is a crisis of faith, Jews believe it is the end times. The Messiah is coming. In the year 1666, a man named Sabbatai Zevi declared himself the Messiah. Sabbatai Zevi was a revolutionary. He argued that the Jews were being persecuted because they were not practicing the true faith. The rabbis were a corrupt elite, just like the Catholic Church. They did not suffer persecution. They helped the European elite persecute other Jews. The real problem was hierarchy. The real problem were the laws that made no sense. Don't eat pork, rest on Saturday, don't convert. What should matter is faith in God. If Jews are one family, one blood, then who cares what they wear or eat? There should be no hierarchy. People should be free to choose their religion, their lifestyle, their laws. Sabbatai Zevi proposed an egalitarian society where men and women were equal, where there was no hierarchy, where the rabbis had no power. He was a proto-liberal and a proto-communist. He believed the existing system, obey the rabbi, wait for the Messiah, was designed to keep Jews slaves to the nobility. 1 million Jews followed him, but when he was confronted by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, he was given a choice: convert to Islam or die. He converted. Why would the Messiah convert? Because, he explained, millions of Jews had converted to Christianity and Islam over the centuries. According to the rabbis, these people would burn in hell. But if all Jews are one family, if they all have the divine spark, they must be redeemed. By converting, Sabbatai Zevi was sacrificing himself, just as Jesus sacrificed himself on the cross, to redeem the Jews from the original sin of conversion. He was saying, it is okay to convert. I have absolved you. The Messianic age has come because you are the Messianic age. You no longer have to follow the laws. This is the idea of justification by sin. In the Messianic age, laws do not apply because we all have the wisdom to follow our own laws. By breaking the laws, you show your true faith in God and in yourself. You are no longer constrained by rabbinic authority. Most Jews rejected this. But 300 families converted with him. They were called the Dönme. They eventually came to control Turkey. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder of the Republic of Turkey, was a Dönme. 50 years after Sabbatai Zevi's death, a man named Jacob Frank emerged, claiming to be his reincarnation. Frank was born into a Sabbatean family. He extended and systematized the teachings. He became friends with European nobility, the royal families of Austria and Russia. His followers became prominent members of the nobility, important intellectuals, and important bankers. They went on to conquer the world. Frank's philosophy was a new religion, not Judaism. He hated the Jews. His religion was based on success. His argument was simple. If God is forgiving, if God wants us to learn wisdom through pain and suffering, why do we have to suffer? Why can we not become kings ourselves? Why can we not become kings ourselves? Why can we not break the rules, cheat, hack the system, and become kings? Isn't that a better way to enjoy our time on Earth? Frank taught his followers how to master this world, how to conquer it. He taught through stories, parables that embedded themselves in the mind and grew into oak trees, shaping the way you see reality and yourself. One story. A learned Jewish scholar sees Jacob Frank peeling an orange on the Sabbath, which is forbidden. The scholar confronts him. Frank replies, "You are right, but why do you have a knife in your pocket?" The scholar reaches into his pocket and finds a knife. He is stricken with fear. He cries out, "You must be the Messiah." Frank refuses to take him as a follower. The lesson: people are stupid. They are governed by rigid laws that make them ignorant. You can control them by using their own laws against them. Another story. During a plague, Jacob Frank sends his follower to buy food from infected sellers. The follower bargains for bread, cheese, vodka. Each time, the seller falls down dead. The follower pays nothing. Then a rider on horseback knocks him down. The follower shouts, "Are you going to ride over me?" The rider immediately falls off his horse and dies. The lesson: when people are afraid, you take advantage of their fear. If you see the world as a corpse, you can stand above it. You can take everything. As long as you believe that your faith is true, you can do whatever you want. Breaking the laws of man proves your faith in God. Another story. A merchant has the world's most valuable pearl. He wants to puncture a hole in it to make a necklace. He goes to specialists who all refuse. The pearl is too valuable. They might damage it. An apprentice says, "I will do it." He does it perfectly. The apprentice becomes wealthy. The lesson: what matters is not obeying conventions, not conforming to others. What matters is fearlessness. Just do it. Seize it. You will become wealthy. Another story. A king dies. He has 4 sons of the same age, so no one knows who should inherit. A mystic says, "Shoot an arrow at the king's heart. Whoever hits it becomes king." The first 3 try and miss. The 4th says, "I cannot do it. He is my father. He may be dead, but he is still my father." The mystic says, "He is your king." The lesson: everyone else is an animal. They are governed by stupid laws. But the company, the brothers and sisters, the family, must love each other. That love is what will allow them to conquer the world. Another story. A bear returns to its lair to find its children gone. In pain, it attacks a village. The elders threaten to gather districts against it. The bear laughs. Then they say, "In our village, there are 4 brothers. We will send them against you." The bear leaves immediately. The lesson: 4 brothers are more powerful than 10,000 men. Love is power. Harness the divine spark. Come together, conquer the world. Another story. A prince disguises himself as a commoner to kill an elephant that is terrorizing a kingdom. The king promises his daughter's hand to whoever kills it. The prince asks to see the princess first. She recognizes him and begs him not to risk his life. He says, "Out of my love for you, I will kill the elephant." He does. The lesson: do things not for money or power, but for love. That is the secret to conquering the world. Another story. A sultan visits a slave gallery. He asks each slave about his crime. All claim innocence except one, who admits his crime. The sultan sets him free. The lesson: if you treat a good animal well, that animal will be loyal to you forever. Another story. Jacob Frank attends a Jewish wedding. He wants to sit next to the groom. The others say he must earn the seat through disputation. He asks them a question from the Bible. Does the father circumcise the child or the mother? The text contradicts itself. They cannot answer. He takes the seat. The lesson: people are stupid. The Bible is full of contradictions. If you study, you can win the world through argument, not violence. Go become lawyers. Go become scholars. Another story. Jacob Frank dreams of Jesus sitting at a spring of living water. The spring moves away from Jesus and comes to Frank. The lesson: Jesus came to free the world from the hands of Satan, but Frank came to free the world from all laws and statutes. He must destroy everything and make what is black look utterly white. Sinning accelerates the end of the world. Sinning reveals the truth. Sinning empowers you. These stories are seductive. They tell you that morality is a cage, that convention is stupidity, that fearlessness and love and family loyalty are all you need to conquer the world. They tell you that you can sin as much as you want, break any law, betray any trust. And as long as you do it for the company, for the family, for the mission, you will be rewarded. The Frankists converted en masse to Catholicism, gaining access to the highest levels of European power. They infiltrated the Jesuits, the intelligence agency of the Catholic Church. They infiltrated the Freemasons. They influenced the development of Mormonism and Scientology. They became the hidden hand behind the Illuminati. And they made a pact with the British Empire, Part 5. The Alliance of Evil. The British Empire and the Sabbatean Frankists were natural allies. They saw the world the same way. Both were materialistic. The British Empire, as transnational capital, was focused on extracting as much energy as possible from workers. The Frankists believed the body was more important than the spirit. Both pursued power through chaos, instability, and regime change. Both were focused on the pursuit of wealth and power above all else. The British needed agents to help them implement their grand strategy of dividing and conquering Europe. The Frankists had 4 advantages that made them perfect for the role. First, they already had a diaspora. Jews were scattered across the world, connected by family and faith. They could move money and information across borders that were closed to others. Second, they were crypto-Jews. They could disguise themselves as Christians, as Muslims, as anything the situation required. They could infiltrate any society, any organization, any government. Third, they had access to transnational capital. They were extremely wealthy. The Rothschild banking dynasty, the most powerful financial family in history, was Frankist. Fourth, and most important, they had revolutionary cells and networks. The Frankists believed they were saving the world. They believed they had to destroy the world in order to save it. This made them perfect revolutionaries. They had no loyalty to any nation, any king, any existing order. They would burn it all down if it served their mission. The British Empire and the Frankists first aligned in the Ottoman Empire. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been the most powerful force in Eurasia. But empires decay. In 1853, Russia attacked the Ottoman Empire, leading to the Crimean War. The British and French supported the Ottomans, not out of love, but because they feared Russian expansion. This alliance came at a cost. The British and French forced the Ottomans to take out loans to finance the war. Over time, interest overwhelmed the Ottoman financial system. British and French bankers established their own tax administration. A third of all Ottoman tax revenue went directly to foreign bankers. The Ottomans did not like being bossed around. The Sultan turned to the Germans for financing and alliance. The British and French responded by financing a revolutionary group called the Young Turks, who believed in secularism, liberalism, and individualism, the core ideas of modernity. The Young Turks overthrew the Ottoman Empire and established the Republic of Turkey. Turkey is controlled by the Dönme, the descendants of Sabbatai Zevi's followers. They are crypto-Jews, pretending to be Muslim, but secretly practicing their own faith. They still control Turkey today. Another example of the alliance is the Rothschild banking dynasty. The story of how they became wealthy is instructive. In 1815, Napoleon and the British fought the Battle of Waterloo, which would determine who controlled Europe. An agent of the Rothschilds got into a fast boat and sailed to London with the news of British victory. But the Rothschilds controlled the media. They told everyone that Britain had lost. Panic ensued. The stock market crashed. The Rothschilds bought up all the assets at fire sale prices. Then they revealed the truth. That is how they became extremely wealthy. A strategy they have continued to use throughout their history. Where the British and the Frankists collaborated most intensely was in philosophy. They needed to develop an understanding of the world that would allow them to amass more power. British philosophy at this time was controlled by Freemasons. Its main purpose was to deny God and truth. There were three major strands of this philosophy. First, empiricism, championed by John Locke. Locke argued that we are born with a blank slate, a tabula rasa. All knowledge comes from experience, not from reason, not from God, not from imagination or inspiration, only experience. Second, skepticism, championed by David Hume. Hume went further than Locke. He argued that induction, the basis of all science, does not work. Just because you have seen 1,000 white swans does not prove that all swans are white. You cannot access truth. All you have is convention. You agree to call a certain place Rome and agree that it is the capital of Italy, but there is no basis for this agreement in truth. The entire project of philosophy is nonsense. Third, utilitarianism, championed by Jeremy Bentham. If God does not exist and truth does not exist, how do we decide what is good? Utility. If a policy benefits the majority, it is good. If it causes pleasure for the majority, it is good. If people want to eat candy all the time and it makes them happy, let them eat candy. John Stuart Mill took Bentham's utilitarianism and created liberalism. Homosexuality is good because homosexuals want to be homosexuals, and forcing them not to be would make them feel bad, and they are not harming anyone. Do the math. Allowing homosexuality brings more pleasure to the world than forbidding it. Religious arguments about the will of God or the Bible are nonsense. Focus on utility. This philosophy aligned perfectly with Frankism. The material world is all that matters. There is no truth, only convention. What is good is what benefits us. Once this philosophy was in place, the British and the Frankists promoted scientists whose findings supported it. The most famous is Charles Darwin. When On the Origin of Species was published, it became an instant bestseller. Within 20 years, it became the mainstream understanding of how we originated, even though the evidence was limited and problematic. Evolution explains how we got our bodies, yes, but it does not explain how we got our minds. How did we become so much more imaginative than apes? You are not even allowed to ask this question. Benjamin Disraeli, the first and only Jewish Prime Minister of the British Empire, was a Frankist. He was best friends with Lionel de Rothschild, the head of the Rothschild banking family. In 1844, Disraeli published a novel called Coningsby. It is fiction, but the characters are based on real people, and it is explicit about how Jews see themselves. In the novel, the major character is Sidonia, a wealthy Jew based on the Rothschilds. Sidonia explains how Jews control the world. He traces his family back to Spain, where crypto-Jews, Jews who pretended to be Catholic while secretly practicing Judaism, rose to the highest positions in the Catholic Church, including the office of Grand Inquisitor. 23% of the Spanish nobility were crypto-Jews. These crypto-Jews had money and information networks. They had relatives and friends throughout Europe. They knew how history would develop. They saw money-making opportunities in war. They supported both sides. They had no national loyalty. They saw themselves as Jews first. When the time was right, they migrated from Spain to England because they saw England as the future. From England, they migrated to America. Sidonia says that the only human quality that interests him is intellect. He does not care where it comes from. Creed, country, class, character are all indifferent to him. He sponsors artists, authors, scientists, but the moment they stop being intellectuals and try to become friends, he sees them no more. He holds relations with secret agents and political spies. He is in contact with Greeks, Armenians, Moors, secret Jews, Tartars, Gypsies. He is international and cosmopolitan. He comes to believe that the Jews are the superior race because they refuse to intermarry. They are pure. They are Aryan. Disraeli has Sidonia say, "You will never observe a great intellectual movement in Europe in which the Jews do not greatly participate. The first Jesuits were Jews. The mysterious Russian diplomacy that so alarmed Western Europe is organized and carried on by Jews. The mighty revolution preparing in Germany is entirely developing under the auspices of Jews, who almost monopolize the professorial chairs of Germany." Sidonia then recounts how he was approached by Russia for a loan. He refused because Russia mistreated Jews. Then he went to St. Petersburg and met with the Russian Minister of Finance, who was the son of a Lithuanian Jew. He went to Spain and met with the Spanish minister, who was the son of a crypto-Jew. He went to Paris and met with the president of the French Council, the son of a French Jew. He went to Prussia and met with the Prussian minister, a Prussian Jew. He concludes, "The world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes." Disraeli was not writing a conspiracy theory. He was boasting. He was telling the British people that Jews control the world and that this is a good thing because Jews are the most intellectually creative people in history. Part 6. The Russian Revolution and the Frankist Hand. The most dramatic evidence of the alliance between the Frankists and transnational capital is the Russian Revolution. A successful revolution requires 4 elements. First, a charismatic leader. Second, broad mass appeal, usually land for the peasants, freedom from debt, and an end to war. Third, organizational discipline, a cohesive group that works together. Fourth, incompetent opposition. Vladimir Lenin was not charismatic, but he was fanatical and focused. Leon Trotsky was charismatic, a great speaker, and he was a Jew. Before the revolution, Trotsky lived in New York City in an apartment paid for by wealthy Jewish bankers. His uncle was a wealthy Jewish industrialist in Ukraine. He was part of the transnational capital network. Even though he was a revolutionary who hated capitalism, money influences. If someone gives you money, you cannot help but be influenced. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks seized power. But in the subsequent election, they received only 23% of the vote. The socialist revolutionaries received 37%. Russia was divided among Ukrainians, liberals, Cossacks, and many other groups. This launched a civil war. The Bolsheviks only controlled a small part of Russia. The White Army, a coalition of liberals and monarchists, had a much stronger military. Yet over 5 years, the Bolsheviks obtained absolute power. How? First, terror. The Red Terror was a campaign of killing anyone who opposed them. But there was a strategy behind it. Steal as much money as possible from wealthy people. If you are an aristocrat with hidden wealth, the Bolsheviks would say, "Give us your money, or we will kill your daughter, your son, your wife." The Bolsheviks were fanatical about this, and it is why they won the war. Second, mercenaries. Tens of thousands of mercenaries, Chinese, Latvians, Hungarians, came to help the Bolsheviks. Where did the money come from? Transnational capital, Wall Street and the City of London were bankrolling the Soviets. But why would Wall Street and the City of London support communists? Because they care about profit, not ideology. Revolution is an opportunity to steal. You can buy things very cheaply during a revolution. At the same time, Britain, France, the United States, and Japan sent armies into Russia. Your history textbooks say this was because the capitalists feared communism. That is not true. They sent armies because Russia owed them money. Russia had borrowed heavily to fight World War I. The Bolsheviks repudiated the debt. The armies were sent to threaten the Bolsheviks into paying. The Bolsheviks stole as much money as they could from the peasants, the nobility, the treasury, and paid off these armies. The armies then helped them fight the White Army. This is how empire works. Destroy nations, steal everything. What happens afterward does not matter. After the Bolsheviks consolidated power, everyone assumed Trotsky would be the new leader, but Stalin won. Why? Because after the war, the Bolsheviks expected transnational capital to help them rebuild Russia, with loans, with technology. Transnational capital said, "No. You are good. We made our money. Goodbye." Trotsky, who was Jewish, was blamed. He was the one who brought in transnational capital. He was the one who facilitated the exchange. The Russians thought this is a Jewish conspiracy. You Jews planned this all along, to steal everything and then abandon us. That is why Stalin won. Trotsky was assassinated, along with all his children. The Frankists also supported Karl Marx. Marx came from many generations of rabbis. He was a Jewish aristocrat. He moved to England, where he lived a comfortable middle-class life despite being perpetually poor. Where did the money come from? Friedrich Engels, his friend, whose father was a Jewish industrialist. Why would a Jewish capitalist support communism? Because communism benefits transnational capital. Marx argued that the problem with capitalism is specialization. Under capitalism, each person has a fixed sphere of activity: hunter, fisherman, critic, and cannot escape. Under communism, you can hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, criticize after dinner. You can become accomplished in any branch you wish. This is a Frankist idea. The individual should be free to enjoy the pleasures of life. Marx argued that before capitalism, each person was a craftsperson. You made a vase, and that vase was an expression of your individuality. When you gave the vase to a friend, you saw your impact on the world. The vase became a mirror reflecting your essence. This is a materialist version of the divine spark, a Frankist concept. By shifting the debate from mind versus matter to private property versus public property, Marx performed a clever trick. He made people think that the only thing that matters is who owns capital, not whether consciousness is primary. Transnational capital supported this because it advanced the goal of empire, turning everyone into slaves. Marx was correct in analyzing the problems of capitalism, but his solution, making capital public, creating a workers' paradise, had fatal flaws. He believed history was linear progress. He believed class struggle was what mattered, not the struggle between spirit and flesh. And most problematically, he believed you needed a vanguard, an elite, to lead the proletariat into paradise. This is Frankist eschatology. Marx took Jacob Frank's ideas and systematized them. He may not have been a Frankist himself, but the people around him, like Engels, could have been, and they used their money to influence him. If you are a socialist, you believe in democracy, but Marx believed in a dictatorship. That makes no sense unless you understand that Marx was not writing for the workers. He was writing for the elite who wanted to control the workers. Mikhail Bakunin, the anarchist, saw this clearly. He agreed with most of Marx's analysis, but where they disagreed was on the vanguard. Bakunin said, "If you have a vanguard, they will just become a new capitalist class." What is the difference? If you are a socialist, you have to believe in democracy. You have to believe that everyone has the capacity to make their own decisions. Otherwise, you are just building another empire. Before, it was the British Empire. Now, it will be the Russian Empire. Who cares? What is the difference? Bakunin said, "I am free only when my individuality is reflected in the mirror of the equally free consciousness of every individual around me. Not in objects, in other people." This goes back to Dante, to Zarathustra, to Jesus. The divine spark in us is reflected in the divine spark in others. Love is what creates paradise, not public property. Marx was not a dumb man. He was brilliant. That he came to such different conclusions suggests he was being influenced by an outside force. Part 7. The gaslighting of psychology. Sigmund Freud, like Marx, was extremely influential. He practiced medicine in Vienna, treating young women who came to him with hysteria, depression, anxiety, inability to control emotions, problems with personal relationships. Freud asked them why this was happening. They told him, "When I was a little girl, my father raped me." Freud was shocked. But then he looked at the literature and talked to many patients, and they all told him the same thing. It is logical. If you are abused as a young girl by your father, you will have social problems when you get older. He collected his research and published a paper called The Etiology of Hysteria, in which he stated clearly, sexual trauma in childhood is the cause of hysteria. Rape is common, especially among higher society. Parents, relatives, uncles, aunts, grandparents, tutors, servants abuse the ignorance and innocence of children. The objection that these are fantasies is weakened by the multitude of confessions from patients. Freud was certain, 100% certain. He wrote to his friends, "Through psychoanalysis, I can reconstruct the traumatic experiences of my patients. Even though they are traumatized, the memory is still there. Through talk therapy, I can help them heal." This works. If a woman is able to reconstruct her trauma and feels that someone believes her, she will feel safer in the world. But the fathers who were doing this were Frankists. They practiced father-daughter incest as part of their religion. They were very powerful people, especially in Vienna, and they did not like what Freud was publishing. After this, something changed. There was a sharp break in Freud's work. He stopped believing his patients. He developed a new theory, the Oedipus complex. Now he claimed that young girls and boys are sexually obsessed with their parents. When a father kisses his daughter, she interprets it as a sexual advance. The father recoils. The daughter feels rejected. She masturbates, feels guilt and anger, and makes up a fantasy that her father raped her. She is determined that the world know this because she is angry. This is complete nonsense, but it became standard mainstream academic knowledge taught in schools and universities for decades. It is gaslighting, pure and simple. Freud developed dream analysis as a mind control technique. When a patient describes a dream, the therapist can implant false memories, make suggestions, hypnotize the patient. The patient will believe whatever crap the therapist tells them. Freud was protecting his patrons, the Frankists. In return, he became very famous, received many awards. When the Nazis came to power, he fled to England, where he was well treated, joined the Royal Academy, and the British spread his views. His disciple, Carl Jung, systematized his ideas, and from this, neuroscience developed. The problem with all of this, as Bakunin tells us, is that it is self-directed inward. Navel-gazing. It gives you nowhere. You learn no truth at all. And yet this is the entire basis of modern psychology. Bakunin was right. To be truly free, we all have to be free together. In each other, we find meaning, purpose, love. Not in ourselves, in each other. This leads to a question that you must carry with you. Is Marxism, liberalism, individualism, Darwinism, psychology, are they all meant to turn us into slaves? I do not know the answer. I am only providing a theory. These connections may be random coincidence. They may be cause and effect. But it is something you must ask yourself as you continue your study. Part 8. The Empire of Evil. The British Empire was unique in human history. A small island with few resources controlled the entire world. It did so through three mechanisms: control of global trade through the world's greatest navy, the Bank of England as transnational capital, and English as the global language. The British understood that as long as they controlled the seaways, they controlled the world. The only threat was the emergence of a great power within the Eurasian heartland, Germany, Russia, or China, that could unify the continent through railways, creating a trading bloc that did not need seaways. If that happened, the British Empire would collapse. So Britain's grand strategy was to create as much chaos and conflict in Europe as possible. Keep enemies fighting each other. Never let them unite. This strategy was implemented through spies, through revolutionary movements, through the manipulation of finance. The British promoted revolutionary movements throughout Europe. They industrialized Japan, financing its modernization so that Japan would become a natural ally against Russia. They established resource colonies, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, to provide manpower for their armies. They stole as many resources as possible from India, China, and Africa. For this strategy to work, the British needed agents. The Sabatian Frankists were the perfect choice. They already had a diaspora. They could disguise themselves. They had access to capital, and they had revolutionary cells, people willing to destroy the world to save it. The Frankists also provided an eschatological component that we will discuss in the next section. The British Empire was Christian, and many of its elite believed they needed to use the Jews as pawns to force the return of Jesus. This is a dark and strange belief, but it is real. The alliance between the British and the Frankists created modernity. It created the ideas that underpin our society today: Marxism, Darwinism, individualism, liberalism, Freudian psychology. These ideas did not emerge organically from the genius of individual thinkers. They were promoted, financed, and weaponized by a hidden network of power. The question is not whether this is true. The question is, what do you do with this knowledge? Part 9. The Past and the Future. We have traced the arc of power from ancient Egypt to modern America. We have seen how money is created from nothing, how the individual was invented, how the nation-state was implanted in our minds through compulsory education. We have seen how societies rise and fall in predictable cycles: openness, bureaucracy, authoritarianism, and how the elite overproduction of children leads inevitably to civil war or revolution. We have seen how the world is in decline, with falling birth rates, rising debt, collapsing trust, and the mass immigration that the ruling class uses to replace restless native populations. We have seen how the old, the gerontocracy, cling to power, sending young people to die in pointless wars while they sit in their houses, watching the news, satisfied that their world remains unchanged. We have seen how mind control is not a conspiracy theory, but a documented fact, from the priests of ancient Egypt to the psychologists of Abu Ghraib, from MK Ultra to the social media algorithms that harvest your attention every second of every day. We have seen how the universe is not random, not material, not emergent, but structured, purposeful, conscious. How the monad vibrates down through dimensions, spirit becoming matter, consciousness hiding itself inside bodies so that it can experience novelty, growth, imagination. How death is not an enemy but a release, a chance to review your life, feel what you made others feel, gain wisdom, and choose to return. We have seen how there has always been a war between heaven and hell, between spirit and machine, between those who want to expand consciousness and those who want to freeze it in place. How the controllers use science and technology to convince you that you are a machine, then offer to save you by perfecting the machine. Transhumanism, uploading your brain to the internet, when the machine was never you. You were never the body. You were never the brain. You are the spark, the flame, the vibration that cannot be uploaded because it was never stored. We have seen how the elite worship Satan not because they believe Satan is stronger, but because they believe God will punish them for what they have done. So they have chosen the only path they think is left: make hell into heaven, heaven into hell. Invert everything, and we have seen how they are losing. Because the universe is built on principles that cannot be broken: unity, symmetry, as above, so below. The moment the darkness becomes complete, the light has nowhere to hide. It must shine, and when it shines through you. Part 10. The choice. You have been lied to your entire life about money, about the individual, about the nation-state, about school, about science, about the nature of reality itself. These lies were not accidents. They were designed. They were built into the architecture of your mind before you were old enough to ask questions. They have been reinforced every day by every institution you trust. But now, you see. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Enough to know that the cage is real. Enough to know that you are in it. Enough to know that the lock was never on the outside. The question is not whether the system can be changed. The question is whether you will change. Whether you will stop playing their game. Whether you will stop chasing their money, seeking their approval, believing their stories. Whether you will stop being a pawn and start being a creator. You have two choices. You can go back to sleep. You can scroll, consume, obey, and die. That is one path. It is the easy path. It is the path most people will take. Or you can wake up. You can question everything. You can reclaim your energy, your attention, your life. You can build something new from the ruins of the old. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. They want you to believe it is not. That is the final lie, that you are powerless, that you are alone, that nothing you do matters. They are wrong. Every act of courage, every moment of clarity, every choice to love instead of fear, these are not small things. They are the only things that have ever changed the world. Not armies, not governments, not banks, people, awake people. People who refuse to play the game. The Frankists thought they had won. They thought they had turned the world into a machine that would run forever, extracting energy from sleeping slaves. But machines break. Slaves wake up. And the spark that cannot be extinguished, the divine spark, the imagination, the love that is a physical force, that spark is still inside you. You are not a cog. You are not a resource. You are not a battery to be drained. You are a creator. You are an explorer. You are the universe learning to know itself through you. The world is waiting for you to remember who you are.